to everybody to our Taking Action for Wellbeing and Work-Life Balance in 2025 virtual boardroom that's been facilitated by HR Recruit and Marion Hewitt. My name's Jo Thompson and I'm a consultant for HR Recruit. I'm joined today by Marion, who will introduce herself shortly. Marion is going to consider multiple elements of wellbeing and resilience and will also touch on work-life balance. If you've got any burning questions or comments during the session, then please put them into the chat box facility and we will cover them as we go along. I'm now going to hand you over to Marion, who will introduce herself and start the event. Thank you.
Thanks, Jo. Yeah, it's great to be back. We've done quite a few sessions with Jo over the last few years now, and the last few years we've done some at the beginning of the year, just to give people an opportunity just to think a bit about work-life balance or well-being or resilience, whichever way we focused it. Not about New Year's resolutions. It's not about creating major life changes. Don't believe with those. It's about what we can be doing in small ways that can support our well-being. So some of you know, recognise some of the names. My background was many years within HR, developed more of an interest in wellbeing, positive psychology and wider mental health. So drawing on lots of that within today's session. If I put the slides up. So the focus, I change the focus slightly every year. And this year I'm looking more specifically at work-life balance because we're talking about it. So it's a term that's thrown around so much. But just before we get into that, I just want to just be clear, this is very much a general session about self-care and well-being. If you are experiencing any significant problems or symptoms relating to health, please do make sure you seek appropriate support. So what we are going to aim to do within this session is to review, what we mean by well-being and work-life balance, actually consider the elements that influence our well-being and work-life balance, and how we can create a realistic and practical plan that will work in your world. So I don't know your world, I don't know the demands, everybody's juggling loads of different things. So actually what we want to achieve will be different. So the first thing actually I want to ask you, what is work-life balance? Stick your thoughts into the chat. What is it? And actually, how do you know when you've got there? We tend to position work-life balance as this kind of state of nirvana where everything fits neatly together and we live this Zen-like existence. And I don't think it works quite like that. So what are people's thoughts about what work-life balance means? Anybody want to put anything in the chat? Ability to switch off from work, yeah. Not think about it, the ability to switch off, yeah. Best self in different areas, not worrying, working longer hours, yeah. When one is not impacting on the other, enough time for both, yeah, not being precious. So actually having separation, detachment. And I think looking at some of those challenges, they're not just about the physical detachment, not just about leaving work or shutting the laptop. Much of it is about the mental elements of it. So yes, having enough time to do things. So thank you for all of those. And we hear the phrase so much. And actually, it's not just about work and life, because to me, life encompasses lots of elements. And, how do we measure it? How do we know what we've got there? I mean, it's arguably, it's not going to be a really subjective and really objective measure. It will largely be, how do we feel? We feel, the sense I'm getting from that is that we've got things at about the right place, the right level, and we feel generally in control of all aspects of our world. We feel generally we've got the resources and the energy. And actually, the whole concept of work-life balance is actually something we've only really had the luxury to think about in more recent times as society's evolved. Previous generations was much more a focus on, you worked to survive, and a lot of the other elements would have been, real luxuries. But let's think about what it actually means. There's a bit of a sense that what we mean often is we want less work and more life. But actually, if we're in a role, or particularly if people are in really creative roles, that they actually love their work and they're getting a lot out of it beyond, most of us work at some level for more than paying the bills. But actually, if a lot of the elements for well-being are met by work, then the balance might be slightly different. And also the sense that we we will put different focus on different things at different points in life, or even at different weeks. If you've got some big project at work, that balance might have to change slightly. Or if you've got something big at home, or you're worried about somebody, you're caring for somebody that's unwell, the balance might need to change for that period of time. So what I'd like you to do is just think about the different areas of your life. Now, I've just put some labels on there that kind of work for me. And think about, at the moment, how do you feel? This is very subjective, obviously. So if 0, the middle of the part is actually, I've got no control over this, it really isn't working for me, and 10 feels, actually, this feels about the right place, then just think about those different sectors. And so just randomly put a number to those different areas. A figure will come into your head, just catch it as you have it. Don't do that in negotiation that we often do. Just write down what those figures are, and just to help you think about, where do I perhaps need to put a bit of attention. And think about, what is currently working well, because yes, we can all make changes, but there'll be some habits, some things that we're doing actually that are helping. What are we doing that we want to make sure we do keep going, that is going to help us maintain the balance between different areas? And just make a note of that. And then let's think about, what are the challenges in terms of us getting the balance that we would like, the levels of well-being we would like. Now, if I ask you to put on that chat, I'm going to put money on the fact that one of the first things that will come up will be time. So put your thoughts into the chat. What are your challenges in terms of getting the balance right between the different areas of your life? What challenges do you face? Time, yeah. Mental load, time and energy, yes. Children, boundaries, saying no, energy, yeah, all of those. Motivation, after tired, demands of others, yeah. And those are real. Time, we have a limited amount of time. We have others that we look after, we want to look after, we will put first, and how we get those happening as well as the things for us. There's often things like also, feeling guilty, that it feels selfish, self-indulgent to do things that we consider to be for ourselves. It may actually be not quite sure how to go about it. I think this time of year, there is just so much information out there, how you create the new you, the best you for 2025, and you get conflicting information, and you don't know where to start. And it's not about major overhauls. It's about, what are the things that I could do slightly differently that would help me get these things fitting together a bit more. But in my experience, actually, it's usually the thought obstacles that are the biggest challenge. It's the giving ourselves permission to do some of these things that would make life better for us. Somebody put in there about, the difficulty saying no, how we put those boundaries in there. Those are things, they don't take extra time to do those things. They're more about the beliefs that we've got, the mental challenges and blockages that can get in the way of us making some of those changes. So, really reflect, actually, yes, I'm accepting that there's limited time. I totally get work can be busy. We'll never get to the end of our to-do list, and you'll have family commitments, other things to do. But actually dig down a bit deeper to actually really challenge yourself as to what other things are getting in the way of you making the changes that you want to make. I suspect this isn't the first year you've thought about it. Things, we try and make changes, some things stick, some things change. But give that bit a real thought, because I think that's a really good starting point to help you in making changes. So as I go through some things, this is just a very simple, not into complex models, stop, start, continue. What are you going to stop doing that you recognise is currently hindering your well-being and balance? What would you like to start doing because it supports your well-being and balance? Make sure you're making realistic, practical notes. And what are you going to continue doing? And when I'm talking about well-being, the models and definitions I usually work with is when we think about well-being is when we have that balance between the challenges we face and the resources we have available. So, several people said about energy being a challenge, but if we've got, a good level of well-being, we've generally got those resources, the energy to do the things that we need to do without feeling totally depleted. And if we've, if that balance is wrong, then it influences our health negatively. But actually, if we can do even more to replenish our resources, to build that energy, whatever word you want to put to it, actually, we want to move towards that state of flourishing and thriving, that area that positive psychology looks at, the evidence about how we can help ourselves, have more energy, do more, be more of the things that we would like to do. So that's kind of where we'd all like to be working towards. And I'm going to go through a few things, and some of these may not seem your standard well-being approach type topics, but I'd encourage you, or I'd like to challenge you in a supportive way to think about where you could make changes. And I do think one of those key ones is how we really take ownership for some of those changes. I'm not trivializing major challenges or not recognizing where there are significant issues, but actually where might I take greater ownership than I currently am. Every decision we make to do something is a decision not to do something else. We will never have time. We need to select how we use the time that we have. So we want to explore some of those choices that we are making that do link to our time. So let's start with that one as a topic. And I don't know whether any of you have come across the book called 4,000 Weeks by Berkman, and where he basically comes from. He has a different perspective. I think his subtitle is something like Time Management for Mortals. And he starts from the premise that we each have around 4,000 weeks on Earth. And it emphasizes the limitations on that time and actually how we should then think about how we use that time. And we get caught into that myth of productivity, that endless feeling that we should be doing more. And actually the thought, belief that actually not doing something is wasting time. I don't know if anybody else was brought up with that, but I was certainly brought up with the constant messaging that if I was doing nothing, I was wasting time. Whereas actually we want to review the value of leisure and rest. Rest shouldn't just be a reward for productivity. It's a vital part of having that balanced life. And I mean conscious rest. I don't mean when we collapse on the sofa and end up watching television for an hour and when our brain is thinking, oh, I've still got to go and do the washing up, or I haven't sorted that out for tomorrow yet. It's about that conscious allocation of time for rest and leisure and relaxation. And if we think about the fact that we need to then prioritize really what matters most, what is most important in your life, and are you prioritizing your time efficiently? We will never get to the end. Well, I'm making a generalization here, but if you have ever got to the end of your to-do list, tell me how you achieved it. Certainly in our work world, we are never going to get to the end. Our desk is never going to be clear. So we have to make those decisions about, where we put those limits, how we put those, and recognize we can't do everything. Let go of perfectionism. I'll cover that again a bit in a moment. Constantly reviewing things can lead to frustration and eats more time. Are you spending time around, relationships, building those, nurturing those, just enjoying them? And that's one of the most valuable ways of spending time. And sort of the key message, if you like, from the book that I mentioned a minute ago, is actually about accepting the limitations of our time and focusing on what really matters and living intentionally rather than on that endless pursuit of productivity. So just think about that, every time you're making a choice re-time, actually does it align with how you really want to be spending your time? Taking away the fact, yes, we do have to do things we don't want to do and there's chores and tasks, but actually as a wider approach to how we use time, are there any changes you might make. All right, Joe, you already read it. I think it's a brilliant book. It's well worth investing in it or listening to it if you haven't come across it. And then the concept of putting others first. Now, obviously, there are people in our world that we will want to put first. And that's fine. I'm certainly not saying we won't be looking after others. What I'm suggesting that we consider is whether we are always putting the needs of others first without actually thinking about whether that's always the best approach to things. So, it can lead to emotional exhaustion, burnout, stress. It can affect us physically if we're constantly doing that. It can strain relationships because, we just get that balance wrong, and reduces overall productivity. So, what can we do to make sure we have got that right? So, we are willingly doing the things that we want to do that put others first and when we need to. But how are we setting healthy boundaries? How can we learn to politely say no when the demands from people are exceeding the capacity? How can we communicate that? Remember, I'm sure you'll have come across that oxygen mask principle, philosophy, whatever you want to do, looking after yourself before you can do look after other people. If we're not investing in ourselves, we're not the best we're not in the best place. We're not turning up as the person we want to be when we are there for others. It's far better to look after ourselves and then we turn up willingly than feeling drained and obliged to do something. Where might we delegate or share responsibility for things? Sometimes we might just get on with things because it feels the quickest way to do it, or feels like it takes longer to show somebody else, or just do it myself, it's quicker, rather than investing in time. And then where can you seek wider support? So just, acknowledge your own needs, and they're valid and essential as well, and how you can balance that along with supporting and caring for those around you, whether it's, family, friends outside work, whether it's colleagues that you're working with. So just think about that. This is quite an interesting area, I think, in terms of work-life balance, because both of these areas get in the way of it, I think. And they're kind of intertwined, or they are intertwined, and they will all stem from quite deeply ingrained thought patterns and beliefs. So actually addressing it, we have to have that awareness around it. And perfectionism, if we're too focused on that, there's links to anxiety, depression and burnout because we set unrealistic expectations. Procrastination also causes guilt and stress and a feeling of being overwhelmed, so also has that negative impact. Perfectionists, spending excessive time refining tasks, which then cause delay, whereas procrastinators delay starting tasks, and then that can result in rushes and perhaps not so good outcomes. Adam Grant's written that book really recently called Hidden Potential, and his argument there is about procrastination, which I've seen similar things elsewhere, is that, procrastination is often linked to that fear of moving out of our comfort zone. And actually, if I think about that, the things that I'm procrastinating or faffing about at are often the things that for some reason I'm not comfortable doing. Either I don't fully understand, or it puts me out there in a way I don't want to be, or just so actually sometimes it's recognizing that is part of it. Or it could be, a fear of failure or judgment. Thinking of procrastination, it does release, or remove immediate stress, but actually it reinforces longer term stress. So what can we do? How can we reduce if we're somebody that recognizes that we might procrastinate, or we might be always striving for perfectionism? How can we set realistic standards, break things into smaller achievable goals and focus on progress rather than perfecting things? And if we've got a growth mindset, some of you come across the work of Carol Dweck, the idea of a fixed or growth mindset, but actually if we drop that growth mindset idea, then we can always improve. We could always do something better if we're learning and evolving, but that doesn't mean to say what we're doing now isn't good enough. And I mean good enough in terms of a perfectly good thing, not a just about adequate level. Practice self-compassion. I'll mention that again later. Those of you that know me know that that comes into most of the things that I talk about. The power of self-kindness. You know, even if something isn't perfect, mistakes are part of growth. We all make them, and actually being kind to ourselves and acknowledging that is useful and beneficial in multiple ways. And then the last one in terms of perfection is, you know, how can you set clear time constraints for tasks to prevent things overrunning? You know, if we constantly evolving, I often sort of think back, you know, the day before holiday, we go on holiday, we can often be really productive because we don't have time to do those things. We just have to clear things off our desk. So how we adopt a similar thing. And then the procrastination, some of this is actually reflecting what leads to our procrastination and then what's the best way to overcome it. So you can have those clear prioritization tools, the Eisenhower matrix, the urgent, important. So you spend time in the right place. Again, breaking tasks down. If you're avoiding something because it feels too huge, how can you break it down? That 2-minute rule for productivity is quite a good one. If a task is going to take less than 2 minutes, just do it. Don't waste time putting it on your time planning or your to-do list. And perhaps motivate yourself with small rewards for task completion. One of the things I think that's quite useful to think about here is actually recognizing what is the best way to help you. Are you somebody that if you get something done, if you've got something that you've been avoiding, you get it over and done with first? Or are you somebody that are better doing a task that actually energizes you a bit, and then when you're feeling in a bit of mind frame, then you're more likely to do a task you've been avoiding? I learned a while ago that was actually my best approach. I'll do something that actually energizes me first, and then actually that puts me in the right mindset to do the things that I might have been avoiding. Please put any thoughts, comments, suggestions, additional ideas into the chat. It'd be great to hear them. So these are my perspectives on things. And then technology. We're looking at work-life balance. Technology can be a real force for good, or it can be a real challenge. So technology has undoubtedly made our life easier in many ways. You know, we don't spend a fraction of the time on things that previous generations have had to, you know, but think about your phone as a starting point and your relationship with it. And I always deliberately use that phrase because I think that's the way it has become. So, you know, the benefits of the phone are clear. You know, it's effectively a life management system. You can access any bit of information almost instantly. It keeps us connected in a positive way. But it's also, as we know, got multiple drawbacks. You know, we have that fear of missing out. We lose time on endlessly scrolling. We have anxiety when it's not nearby, that need to constantly check it. And, you know, when we're trying to put in healthy boundaries in relation to technology, we are battling against some significant challenges. You know, they're designed to make us want to be addicted to them, for want of a better word. You know, we get those dopamine rewards from those small triggers of positivity that we get. So, you know, the way they build in functionality is part of what they're doing. They want us to keep the devices in our hand and working all the time. But problems, it blurs boundaries. It means that we get information overload. It impacts social connections. You know, how often do you see people out together and they're not actually together? Well, they might be physically, but actually they're all on their devices. So, yeah, I left my phone at work the other week. Yeah, I find it is so liberating. Once you get over that initial anxiety, and actually that in itself is quite disturbing when we realise actually how much we do look at the phone, but actually getting used to it. So think about how can you set good boundaries around your phone. You know, can you literally put it away at a certain time of the evening? If you've got you know, ideally you have a work phone and a personal phone, and then you literally can separate those two out. Use the functionality on the phone to create those do not disturb mode, so it doesn't interact. You can set things up so that things can override it. I have mine set up so it goes on to do not disturb at 9 until 8 in the morning, but then I've got my 3 daughters as favorites in my contacts, so they can override it. So actually, in reality, those are the only ones that I need to be able to hear from, and then I can use the technology to help me disconnect. Remove any apps that you're just using that just distract you. organize your apps, put them in folders, take them off your home screen. All those little things create obstacles that are likely to stop us just picking the phone up and then losing time scrolling. Try and make the bedroom a phone free. Buy an alarm clock, because if it's by the side of the bed, or it's too easy just to have a last minute check of emails and then end up getting caught into work thinking or sidetracked on Facebook or something. So just think about where you might make changes in phone use. Thinking about the email element of it, how you can help that, how you schedule specific times. Can you take them off? You've got your work emails on your personal phone. Are you actually in a role when you need that? That could be really liberating if you could take those off, and then you can only actually look at work emails and looking at comments at the beginning, actually creating those boundaries between work and outside work is really tough, and actually is usually harder than the physical boundaries. So how can you have those disconnects? Limit out of hours emailing, use the tools that actually delay sending, unsubscribe from unnecessary emails. Again, practice that 2-minute rule. If you can answer it quickly, then do it. Rather than just keep rereading it. All these are small things that just help use time more effectively, help us not get sucked in, and then we can get the balance better. Social media, set usage limits, create the feed, turn off notifications. That applies to phone use as well. Turn off all the things that you really don't need to be telling you about. And those detox breaks from all technology is really powerful. And sometimes you just build them into other things. I try and go out for a walk every lunchtime. And I never take my phone out with me. And I found such a difference in terms of that disconnect and recharge between just having my phone in my pocket and just knowing I was totally disconnected from everything like that for 20 minutes. Just really made a difference. Once I'd gone through that sense of what happens if something happens in 20 minutes, in reality, it's not that likely. So I would encourage you just to think about those small changes you could make in terms of your use of technology, particularly, how you use your phone, how you use that to have better barriers and boundaries between work and outside work. So just make notes. And then I said this would be in here somewhere. Self-kindness, the power of self-compassion. We can't do everything and be everything for everyone all of the time. And actually, we are as important as everybody and everything else. And we need to show the same kindness to ourselves as we do for others. And there's different elements of this when we look at how the research looks at it. And so many of us live with that inner critic, that inner voice that talks to ourselves in a way that we would never dream of talking to somebody else. An exercise some of you may well have done with me, but next time something happens that doesn't go well, notice what you're saying, literally write it down and then read it out and think about, would you say that to somebody that you cared about? And it can be quite startling, the difference. We speak to ourselves in a way that we would never dream of talking to somebody else. So self-kindness, part of that is about the difference between self-kindness and self-judgment. So treating ourselves with the same kindness. So when we're looking at well-being, work-life balance, actually, we deserve that kindness. We deserve being looking after ourselves, rather than constantly judging ourselves on all the things on our list that we haven't got done. And in reality, how many of us ever make a manageable to-do list? How many of us set a list for today that actually we think we can really complete? So, be kind to yourself. We are always doing the best that we can with the resources we have available. And then the theory talks about the difference between common humanity and isolation. Recognize that actually there are ups and downs in life. People do make mistakes, and everybody does that. We tend to often feel isolated, when we certainly, social media, back to the previous one, that face that people put onto the world, we get that sense that everybody else is managing better than me. It's only me that's really struggling to keep all the balls in the air. So actually, rather than feeling isolated in that, actually recognize that everybody has their challenges. We just don't know what they are. And then having that mindful perspective on how we're feeling, notice how we're feeling and responding to that rather than really getting involved in it, if that makes sense. So just an awareness of things, and from that awareness then making conscious decisions about what's the best thing for me to do if I'm caring for myself. And so this isn't about saying, that we can always just be doing, I'm not for one moment suggesting we're always just doing something that feels indulgent or luxurious. This is just about the kindness we show to ourselves, showing ourselves the same consideration as we show other people. And there is an increasing body of evidence that shows that practicing self-compassion is a really strong predictor of good well-being and wider satisfaction with life. To me, it's kind of a win-win. It's a nicer route to better outcomes. And the research shows us, well-being, performance, growth are all better through an approach of self-compassion. And so it's far nicer to have an inner friend than an inner critic. So notice your inner voice, see if that is creating challenges for you in terms of your well-being, in terms of how you're allocating your time, in terms of how the balance between the different areas of your life are working out. Right, this is one several people mentioned, and I've sort of alluded to it in different areas, but think about it more specifically, because often it is the blurring of boundaries that can be part of where we feel the balance is wrong. All the talk about flexible working and all the benefits that people have felt with that. Sometimes alongside that flexibility, we get blurring, whereas we want to get it integrated in a way that works well for us. So in terms of how we get those boundaries, be clear on what are your priorities, both personal and professional, and then guide those priorities to use those priorities to guide how you spend your time, which links back to what I was saying earlier about, are you spending your time in the right places? Now, this one might sound a bit simplistic, and it probably is, but just see how can you set work hours and stick to them. Rather than just think, oh, just do this, or just do this. It's only because we've got to do something else if we manage to leave set a particular time, but set a fixed schedule for work and avoid working outside those hours. In terms of taking ownership, have you got greater ownership of that than you might be taking? And communicate that to colleagues. And generally, people won't hold it against you. Usually people have great respect for people that are very clear in terms of their parameters around work. Learn to say no, politely declining additional commitments and tasks that are outside what you can really cope with, or use it as, not now, or can we reevaluate other things, rather than just constantly feeling the need to take something else on because we want to support others. Make sure you're scheduling breaks and downtimes in the same way as you schedule meetings and other things that you need to do. Plan them into your day as well as outside of work. And plan in those non-work activities, the other boundaries, the hobbies and seeing friends, the things that actually are really important to you, but in the day-to-day of life just get dropped further and further down the list. The notifications, linking back to what we were saying about technology, turn off all notifications outside working hours, have an automatic out of office response for after hours. Delegate things where you can. Share responsibilities and use that. If you're working at home, it's not always feasible, but as far as possible, how can you have that designated workspace? If it is just the table, just shut your laptop down, physically put it away at the end of the day. And then just practice that assertive communication. It doesn't have to be confrontational. It's just clear in terms of your boundaries. So some of you will have seen me or heard me talk about this one before. The vast majority of the choices and decisions we make on every day are unconscious. They have to be. We have around 60,000 thoughts a day, and 95% of those will be the same as yesterday. We can't consciously process anything, but actually everything. But if we want to make changes, we have to notice some of those thoughts to then be able to make some of those changes. This phrase comes paraphrased from some work from Viktor Frankl, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning. And he talks about between stimulus and response, we have the power to choose. So there is some form of trigger and we respond. And most of the time we are doing that unconsciously. But actually, if we think about it, there's that space. And if we catch, I like to think the idea of catching that space between the stimulus and how we respond, and thinking about how we can choose differently. What do we want to choose? I mean, ultimately, it's kind of what CBT is, if any of you cover that, catching your thoughts, reframing them. But this is also about, the habits, the choices we're making. If somebody comes in and says, have you got 5 minutes? We just automatically say yes. Actually, just taking that moment to think, actually, do I have that capacity? So just have that idea, catch that space and think about actually how I'm about to respond. Is that the best response for my well-being, for my work-life balance, in relation to the things that are important to my world, the things that I want and choose to prioritize? So to bring that back to the initial questions, what from all those things would you like to stop doing that hinders your well-being and balance? So, phone kept by the bed and last minute check of emails. What are you going to start doing because it supports your well-being and balance? Commit to shutting down the laptop at 5:30. What are you going to continue doing because you realise the benefits, taking a short walk every lunchtime? And make sure that the things that you are writing down are very specific actions that you will take, when and how often. And make sure they are realistic for your life. Set yourself up for success. Practice the self-compassion, the self-kindness from here when you're creating your plan. Try and make them rewarding and enjoyable. If we enjoy what we're doing, we're much more likely to stick with them. And actually, a lot of the things that I've suggested and talking about are actually about changing habits. They're not significant changes that make an impact on time as such. They are habits that we can change that have the ongoing effect of positively changing the balance that we have between different areas. So there's just kind of the reminders of the topics that I've talked through. Which area of your life needs greatest attention now? Where do you feel the balance has got lost? What did you notice as your greatest challenges when we were thinking about the barriers to getting the balance that you would like? What are you currently doing that's working well? And then where might I use my time differently? Where are there choices I could make that are different, that would work better for me? Is the balance between the needs of others and the needs for me right? Do I need to rebalance that at all? Do I strive for perfectionism or lose time through procrastination? Are any of those suggestions things that will benefit you? Technology is usually an area that we could all have more helpful habits. So I'd encourage you to think that. And then also to think about how kind are you being? Are you treating yourself with kindness? Are you supporting and encouraging yourself in terms of getting the balance right between different things? Or are you constantly beating yourself up for not doing enough in all of the areas of life? I was asked something recently and I sort of look back when my kids were younger and just think about how I was just constantly beating myself up because I didn't feel I was present enough at work and doing everything I could there. I didn't feel I was a good enough parent and doing enough there, and just constantly having that inner voice going, as rather than actually recognizing I was doing my best. And when I look back, I was actually doing pretty well. But actually, when you're just so focused on trying to keep everything going, you lose sight of that. So, be kind to yourself in trying to do all of this. Recognize you're doing your best. But within that self-kindness, think about, what could I do differently, actually, that will help me do more, be more in the things that are of most importance to me. So I'm going to put slides down in a moment and ask for comments and chats and ideas from you, but just a bit more about the work that I do. If any of you are interested or finding out more about any of that. Unleashing You is my program for personal growth, organizational performance, engagement and wellbeing, an evidence-based program drawing on positive psychology and approved by the Institute of Leadership. Also do a lot of mental health first aid and wider mental health awareness training. I do workshops, which I love doing these ones, with leadership teams on developing that strategic and the business case for wellbeing, and a lot of sessions around resilience and self-care. So if any of those are interested, obviously, please get in touch. I do have a regular a newsletter that goes out every couple of weeks with a blog. So if you're interested in being added to the list for that, please just stick your email address within the chat. But now I'd be interested to hear any thoughts, suggestions that people have got, or anything. If you want accountability, if you put one of your actions into the chat, that will help you stick to it. Any particular thoughts or questions? Thank you. Anything particularly resonate? What about the area of technology? Anybody would benefit from making some changes in that area? Anybody want to talk to me or put it in the chat? Yeah, thank you, Simona. Yeah, do not disturb feature. It really does help. And actually putting it right away. Yes, and I think one of the things of actually physically putting your phone away, the fact that it's quite difficult initially actually just shows how important it is that, you know, we're just using it too much, and how often do you just put your phone out because you're not doing anything else in that second rather than actually you need it for anything. Yeah, read 4,000 weeks. Yeah. Plan work into the calendar. Yeah. And block out to clear time to see what other things. Yeah, book time in the meeting between meetings. Yeah, so often, you know, we book the time, all the meetings, and then we don't have time to do the work between them. So, okay. What's just going up? Protected time for a walk, coffee, catch up. Yeah. Yes, that recalibrate. Doing the task I put off first, otherwise I'll fill the day with other things. Yes. Yeah, different approaches work for different people. I'll say, yeah, looked out for me that actually I do something that I quite enjoy doing, and then I'll do the one that I've been avoiding. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. More time for me. Yes. And it's the fact, you know, we won't have more time, but actually we have to consciously choose that actually this is the time I'm going to give to me. Because then actually I'll feel better then. And making sure it's conscious time. It's not just time spent when just avoiding something else, actually allocating that time. So brilliant. Thank you. Thank you for all the comments into there. And hopefully I've given you lots of food for thought and some actions that you can take away. But just say, can't reinforce and make sure they're realistic and practical for your world. Make sure they're small and manageable, and then you can build on that. See what works, test it. Look again at where the balance is in a few weeks, fine tune your plan, and just keep going from there. All right, I'll hand you back to Jo.
Thanks, Marion. Lots of positive comments, and obviously lots of people have taken things away. So a good session there. We're going to send out some correspondence to everyone that's signed up for the event, and I'll put a post on LinkedIn. So if you would like a copy of the follow-up information and the recording, then please put a comment against the LinkedIn post. Our next event is on the 30th of January and is called Microaggression at Work. A link to sign up for this will be included in the email. If anyone is recruiting, we've also got accountancy recruit, FD recruit and exec recruit within the group. Otherwise, I'd just like to say a massive thanks to Marion for your time and effort in putting the event together, and to everyone for tuning in. Thanks very much.